अंग्रेज अपना लगान और न्यूज लॉन्ड्री अपना हफ्ता कभी नहीं छोड़ते. Welcome to another episode of Newslaundry Hafta. I'm Abhinandan Sekhri.
Mohammed Sinwar, Hamas's presumed leader in Gaza and the brother of Yahya Sinwar, was reportedly killed by Israel's military, reports revealed this week. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu has said Israel accepted a new ceasefire proposal presented by US President Donald Trump's Middle East envoy.
If you were to speak to the Israel Defense Forces, many people in the military establishment, they would say we basically achieved, all of our military goals, in terms of going in, dismantling a lot of Hamas's weapons stockpiles, many, but certainly not all of their tunnels, killing many of their fighters in just the very early months of the war, in the first 3-4 months of the war. So what were we doing there? What was Bibi Netanyahu kind of, keeping? The Netanyahu government obviously sort of, wanted to continue waging this war until the full conquest of Gaza. And as a part of that,
When you say the Netanyahu government was escalating the violence or bombing, is it Netanyahu government or just Netanyahu?
His government is actually very precarious. They're hanging on basically just in the parliament, the Knesset, by 2 or 3 seats.
Day-to-day reportage, how difficult is it? Because you can't get into the Gaza Strip of Palestine unless you are accompanied, if at all. So
I, like many foreign correspondents, we can't get into Gaza. We've actually, the Foreign Press Association has actually sued the Israeli government to let us in. Their argument is that it's not safe.
Well, considering, depending on whose numbers you go by, between 170 to 200 Palestinian journalists have been killed in Palestine by the Israeli forces.
Correct.
I wonder where the danger comes from.
And exactly. And our argument is that
At the end of the day, the genocide still continues and the brutality of it is obvious. And anyone who is denying it right now is either deeply prejudiced and doesn't consider the Arab body to be a human body, or is profoundly propagandist.
Trump may end up applying more pressure on Netanyahu than Biden did or Biden was willing to do. As a Republican, as somebody who was, seen as, before he entered office, he was seen as the most Israel-friendly president in U.S. history.
You have reported from Israel and in India. In one sense, if not the population in general, the governments do have a huge affinity.
In many ways, if you were to read the Israeli press, kind of Netanyahu, it's completely different vibe from
the Indian press.
From the Indian press. Yeah, it's very critical of Netanyahu. Even if the argument is,
I don't know what journalism is anymore in this country. I'll be very honest, barring a handful. You guys are doing debate work. I speak to Manisha. I've done a show with her. And there are a handful. But even on YouTube, I find that...
Yeah. It is the influence of the ecosystem that has emerged, with lots of YouTubers.
See, I think the thing with Trump is that he's a very obvious, unpolished sort of villain. And the way that he takes his decisions are so wild and unstructured that it's very easy to point out that this is how things are eroding, these are how systems are changing, these are very immediate threats.
Welcome to Chhota Hafta. Now, Chhota Hafta is but a small, chhota version of a complete weekly podcast, Newslaundry Hafta. The Newslaundry Hafta is where you get the week's news, what made the headlines, what didn't make the headlines, but the full version is available to subscribers only. And I don't mean YouTube subscribers, although YouTube subscribers are also very welcome, very, very grateful to you, but also to Newslaundry subscribers, the paying subscribers who pay to keep news free. So you can also become a paying subscriber by clicking the subscription link. Now, what do you get if you're a paying subscriber? You get access to all our paywall content, all interviews, podcasts, and importantly, you get access to a full unedited Hafta, where you not only get to hear the week's news, but you get to hear the Newslaundry editors' positions on matters. You get to see their biases, what are their prejudices. It's an exercise in transparency while also informing you, and we have a few quips and jokes and agreements and disagreements thrown in. So listen to the full Hafta, subscribe to Newslaundry, and pay to keep news free. Here we go. अंग्रेज अपना लगान और न्यूज लॉन्ड्री अपना हफ्ता कभी नहीं छोड़ते. Welcome to another episode of Newslaundry Hafta. I'm Abhinandan Sekhri. We're recording this on Friday, the 30th of May at 11 a.m. in the morning. Before I introduce the panel, you'll notice Manisha is not here. Well, that is because she is in what we in Punjab call LA. Some of you may call it LA. And in LA, she will be delivering a keynote lecture in San Diego on the 4th of June at the South Asia Center in the University of California. So those of you who want to attend. But more importantly, on the 1st of June in LA, near Manhattan Beach, there is going to be a subscriber meet with Manisha Pandey, the managing editor of Newslaundry and the host of Nuisance. This meet is open for subscribers only, so mail us at subscription@newslaundry.com. You probably have already got an email in case you want to attend this, so that we know how many people are landing up, so we can kind of plan accordingly. But if you're not a subscriber and want to give us some feedback, some critique, some input, some suggestions, Manisha will be having a one-on-one with all of you. Well, not a one-on-one, but one-on how many of you turn up. Subscription@newslaundry.com. Like we have regular subscriber meetings whenever any of us travel. This is yet another, and this time it's in LA. So yeah, do attend. We'd love to hear from you. Like I've told you many times, some of our best ideas have come from you, the subscribers. So come, even if you just want to come for a coffee, or if you want to come with any serious suggestions, all are welcome. On that note, let me tell you who all will be here. Already here is Raman Kirpal.
Hello.
And Jayashree Arunachalam.
Hello.
Joining us soon will be Gerry Shih. I'm not sure I've pronounced that correctly, although I have known him for a while. He is the Jerusalem bureau chief of the Washington Post, and as luck would have it, he is here right now. So I thought he'd be a fantastic person to speak about what is happening there, because many of our subscribers have said that we should have a detailed discussion on that issue. We've had a few with Vasu when he had visited, but we just thought that we should have a guest who is actually reporting from there to have a, discussion about it that could truly enrich your lives, rather than all of us who have probably read and seen things similar to what you have. So he's going to be here soon. And also joining us will be Jyotsna Mohan. She's a journalist and author. She's also columnist with Gulf News. She was previously a senior news anchor with NDTV for several years. She'll be talking about Pratap, a defiant newspaper on which she's written a book. And this newspaper apparently is something of, it has a legacy of immense bravery and courage. So yes, so till they are back, we shall give you the headlines and Newslaundry Hafta, that is this podcast, our weekly podcast, is going to go behind the paywall. We've kept it outside the paywall for long enough because many of you suggested we should keep it outside the paywall for a while, so you can send it to your friends, relatives, etc., 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 so they can see what we do, and if they like us, they might subscribe. So I think after almost 6 or 7 weeks of being outside the paywall, we're pulling it back in, so you can only listen or watch the full hafta if you're a subscriber. On that note, please, Jayashree, you can give us the headlines. Thank you. Some new developments over the last, I think, 2 or 3, which are a little different from what's been happening for the last couple of years. One is France, Canada, and UK came out with very strong statements, I guess, condemning Israel and supporting,
I think Germany also.
Even Germany.
Germany did as well, which was a huge break, actually, because Germany is always so careful on treading on this. And I mean, I know for a fact, because I've spoken to several people who, work with the German government in different capacities, that they've been very uncomfortable for a very long time. And there've been a lot of discontent, but they haven't said anything publicly because of the history. But now they finally have.
Yeah, I think, we're definitely seeing some really interesting shifts diplomatically. The people who, there would be many people who say that why didn't this come sooner? And I think, if you were to speak to the Israel Defense Forces, many people in the military establishment, they would say we basically achieved, all of our military goals, in terms of going in, dismantling a lot of Hamas's weapons stockpiles, many, but certainly not all of their tunnels, killing many of their fighters in just the very early months of the war, in the first 3-4 months of the war. So what were we doing there? What was Bibi Netanyahu kind of, keeping the army and sort of continuing this kind of prolonged operation and destruction and for. And so kind of, I think Israeli society and the world was kind of watching sort of this negotiation process go on in the background to sort of, to see if Israel and Hamas could reach a deal to get more and more hostages out. What we basically saw, I think, since January was that,
So was there any domestic pressure? It's just international pressure that's building up. And secondly, when you say the Netanyahu government was escalating the violence or, bombing, is it Netanyahu government or just Netanyahu? Because one hears of certain conflict within the government also. I mean, I think the defense minister was either sacked or resigned. Now the person in charge of this settlement is his ultra-right ally, who's the finance minister apparently. So these two things, the pressure is only international and not domestic. And is it the government or is it just him?
I'll answer the second question first, which is basically that, his government is actually very precarious. They're hanging on basically just in the parliament, the Knesset, by like 2 or 3 seats. And because of that, he's extremely beholden to these extreme right political parties who may only control, let's say 5% of the vote. But essentially whatever that they have demanded, which, essentially, their vision is for Israel to essentially conquer, occupy long term, and reestablish Jewish settlements in Gaza and the West Bank, right? That's kind of their ultimate vision. And at every juncture, at least so far, we've seen Benjamin Netanyahu kind of cater to that ultimate sort of objective while doing whatever he can to kind of, stall.
I think so. A lot of people who are willing to overlook the horrors that are happening in Gaza and to Palestine right now are sort of forced to wake up with all the headlines on, babies are starving and there's no food and so on. Can you talk us through a little bit on the controversy around the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation? What is the US's involvement in it? I know it's something to do with US contractors, and there is a lot of backlash because they're saying that it completely violates humanitarian grounds of how you're supposed to distribute aid, right? Because a neutral party who's not engaged in conflict is supposed to be delivering aid, but in this case, Israel is the occupying force and it is taken over the distribution of aid. So why has this been brought in? What is the sort of response to it? Is it a popular sort of plan in Israel, or?
Yeah, it's a very murky organization. And so basically we know that from the early days of the war, essentially Israel said, because Hamas controls the Gaza Strip, whatever aid that we sent in, we believe that they basically steal a bunch of it and then they resell it on the black market. They make a bunch of money that they can use for their own sort of recruitment or weapons manufacture. We have we've spoken to many sort of, foreign diplomats, aid officials. We've never actually gotten sort of substantial evidence or proof that Hamas actually does that. But that is the Israeli government's argument. And so from the very beginning, they wanted to have some kind of a...
So how do you see the US role? In fact, US has taken a very personal take. They have a very personal take on this. Even people who are protesting against Israel on the US land, they have gone against them.
They cancel visas.
I think it's really interesting because there's many people who would argue that Trump may end up applying more pressure on Netanyahu than Biden did or Biden was willing to do. As a Republican, as somebody who was, seen as, before he entered office, he was seen as the most pro-Israel, Israel-friendly president in U.S. history, right? He moved the embassy to Jerusalem.
Right, exactly.
He did all this stuff. But I think there's a lot of concern right now within kind of the pro-Israel lobby in the U.S., in Israel itself. I've spoken to, senior Likud and, people around kind of in Bibi world who are kind of in like full-blown panic. What is it that, he completely ditched us in when he went to the Middle East, he went to Saudi Arabia and right in the Gulf countries without stopping here. He's continuously...
And that was noticed. A lot of news platforms especially mentioned that he has done this entire trip without meeting Bibi or going to Israel.
Absolutely. And I think he, and the as one of people in Trump world told me, the his meeting with Netanyahu in the Oval Office was very chilly, right? Kind of, as they put it, one notch above the Zelensky meeting.
Really? Okay.
I mean, certainly it wasn't that
Sure,
bad.
yeah,
That's
but-
just completely off the
But
charts.
compared to what it was like earlier.
And the thing that we have with Trump is that, I mean, he seems to sort of be single-handedly unraveling America's position in this global order and so on. And if that sort of brings about an end to American support to Israel, I think that's a great thing. But also, I just don't know if that'll happen because, I mean, Zionism in its form right now is a language of brutality. And I think it's an ever-escalating brutality. And now that this perception battle has been lost, even after decades of being painted as a sort of struggling state surrounded by terrorists, even though now everyone sees the occupation, the response to it is to escalate. So
Tell us about this book that you wrote on Pratap. Why did you choose this newspaper, and why is it unusually defined as opposed to other newspapers in the country?
Why did I? Okay, firstly, I have to do this.
Yes, the link is in the show notes. So that's Pratap. You plug the book. There's a graphic coming up while Jyotsna holds it up as
I
well.
don't know, but
If you want to order it, the link is in the show notes below. And I'm sure when Jyotsna's back, she can sign a few copies and send. So you can mail us at subscription@newslaundry.com if you want a signed copy of the book, in which case we'll buy it for you and sign it, get it signed and send it to you. And if you just want to order directly, the link is in the show notes.
so very easy to say why I wrote it, because it's a family story. I think this is a story that was waiting to be written. ये होता ना कोई family legacy. Sometimes you just have it and it's there. But it could have been. Many people say, why didn't you write it years ago? So that's part of the thing. But this was a family newspaper started by my great grandfather in Lahore in 1919, just about 12 days before the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. Was suspended immediately by the British. For a year, they were not allowed to report on the Jallianwala Bagh massacre.
I have maintained that institutionally, the US is really strong when it comes to why the freedom of press matters. It goes beyond politics. Of course, it's very polarized now, the kind of people who are being patronized by Trump.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I think what we're seeing with Trump in the second term, it's pretty alarming. I mean, it just feels like in some ways kind of, more real in a way. It seems sort of this methodical targeting and dismantlement of a lot of these kind of, institutions that we're so used to.
But they're not going down. I mean, I see late night, Jimmy Kimmel, Jon Stewart, they haven't toned down. Even after Bilma met with Trump, his next 2 episodes, he ripped into Trump. I mean, I don't know about the mainstream press, but at least late night television hasn't toned
It's
down
true.
at all.
I would argue that, I think maybe we should kind of look at it from a slightly different perspective, which is that
in India, it is difficult to. You have to defend every factual report that comes out because there's this constant feel that you are saying something in order to topple the government or overturn the government. And I want to mention one very specific example, which I read in the Times of India yesterday, which was the headline was a law student in Nagpur has been suspended. Okay, and that was the headline. And then I read the copy, and this is what Times of India wrote. Finally, a law student with an elite Nagpur law school has been suspended for 6 months after she was found in a hotel room with a suspected urban Naxal. And I'm like,
What the fuck does
what
that
does that
mean?
mean? Like, what is an
Dear
urban
God.
Naxal? Like, how dare you report it so blandly? And
I don't know what journalism is anymore in this country. I'll be very honest, barring a handful. You guys are doing stick work. I speak to Manisha. I've done a show with her. And there are a handful. But even on YouTube, I find that the way to go forward is either to be on this side or to be on this side. I'm not saying being neutral. I'm saying journalism is about speaking about the wrong now, right? We can't look at that neutrality factor. That has moved on. You have to flag what is wrong. But even within that, I really don't know what is genuine anymore. Because the lines have been so firmly drawn.
बस मुफ्त में इतना ही मिलेगा. For the full uncut podcast, Subscribe to Newslaundry and pay to keep news free. The best way to listen to the Hafta and indeed all our podcasts is through the Newslaundry app. You can download the app by clicking on the links given in the show notes. So do download our app and get the best podcast experience. And also pay for news and support a new news media ecosystem that Newslaundry is trying to encourage, where we are accountable to you because we run on contributions that you make. We don't take government ads, we don't take corporations ads, so that news serves the public, because when the public pays, the public is served. Subscribe to Newslaundry, click on the link in the show notes below and proudly say, I pay to keep news free.